Good morning. Welcome to Law Power Hour. Good morning, Todd Perkins. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's really exciting to have a man who's representing Mr. Merriweather sitting next to me.
Mr. Merriweather's an interesting guy.
I know, but when I was looking at your credits, it's right out there that you were his lawyer, but you've also done an incredible job in the city of Detroit representing people in African American community and the Caucasian community in southeastern Michigan. So how did you get started in the law? Tell us about your background.
Well, I didn't grow up too far from here. What you would call my neighborhood is called the North End of Detroit. And I grew up here, and I went to U of D High School. From U of D High School, I went off to school in New Hampshire. At some point in time, I had a benefit to go to school to France for a minute. Then I come back home, and actually, after graduating from college, taught French to kids for a year, and then went to law school. I went to U of D Law School downtown. Hope they don't move that building up to the main campus, but went to school downtown, got a job at the Court of Appeals while in school. And from that point, when I graduated, there were not a lot of offers. I took tax as my background or as my electives. I thought I was going to be a tax attorney, and that didn't unfold. And I just opened, as soon as I got my license, I opened up a practice. And from that point forward, almost 22 years later, I am still downtown in Detroit, have experienced the change that's going on downtown, looking at the positives and some of the negatives, and looking forward to the next 22 years in the city of Detroit. And I travel a lot, too, because I have some other businesses in New York and Chicago. But Detroit's always going to be my home.
So if our listeners want to get a hold of you, how do we reach you?
Well, you can call me at my office. My office is 313-964-1702. And even on weekends, we have what we call a weekend counsel, a weekend attorney who will answer the phone. This weekend, it'll be Stephen Chaco, who will answer the calls and disseminate and just delegate those calls to other attorneys in the firm if they're emergencies, or we will have them responded to on Monday morning.
Is there one particular area of focus that your firm is involved in? Are you still doing the corporate and
Fighting.
Fighting. That's
Fighting. Fighting.
Litigation.
Litigation. And it's a different mentality because we do transactional work, but as a litigator, once you're a litigator, it's nothing you don't feel like you can do, but you have to have the right team to sort of accoutre yourself with, because you can't do everything in this business, but you can do one or two things better. You want to do one or two things better than anyone else does them. So I have to say litigation, and from that point, you build a team that can help you do the transactional work, to do the things that growing businesses, small businesses that are coming, that are being birthed here, businesses that are struggling because of the growth. That's what we're going to start experiencing. People, the mom and pop shops that have held Detroit together, that are now being alienated because of the big box shops that are coming in. So you want to be able to provide them a service to help them be able to compete. So when you have that mentality of fight, litigation, but you then borrow that or allow those other people on your team to borrow that mentality, and imagine taking that fight mentality to a transactional lawyer. You're going to get nothing but the best.
Well, here's the point that you just made. If I understand what you just said, and it's really important for our audience to understand, is you want to protect the rights of the people who've protected and held this city together for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
You're second generation, and you live in the city. Your children live here. They go to school here.
Yes.
And you're invested in the city. Your law firm's downtown.
Yes.
You've got 8 or 10 people in your law firm, and your support staff, you're all downtown. So you've been here for years. Now, all of a sudden, there's this proliferation. There's this huge movement of people coming into the city. And listeners have heard me say it. It's Whitey on the move coming in. They do not understand the culture of the city.
Yeah.
They think they can come in with their ex-urbanite ways. They can go downtown and they can go to the arenas and they can go to all the Tony facilities in town and they can get in their cars and they can go back to the suburbs, or they can come into the city and they can buy townhouses and they can get condos and they can keep on pushing the price up to the exclusion of the people who protected the city. What can we do to protect the citizens who protected the city?
Well, one, I believe that those people who are in the city, the best plan is to stay, because what happens is, you're right. You move out. I've had a lot of clients who just recently, in just conversation, because you have a relationship with clients and they call you about selling their house and want to look at the closing documents and things of that nature. And I've had a lot of clients who have sold their houses, and those houses that they're selling are $10,000, $20,000, and $30,000 above their asking price. Bidding wars on some houses in certain neighborhoods. And what it should do is should set off a signal to everybody that there's, this wave is still coming. I'm an investor, so I believe in looking at the numbers and looking at how the economy is moving. We're due for another dip in the economy. I don't think that the dip in the economy is going to affect Detroit as bad as it will other places, because Detroit has so much growth to enjoy, because I believe that there was an artificial repression or suppression of everything that was good to come in Detroit because of racism over the past 50 years.
Okay, well, look what happened. There was the Detroit riots,
Yep.
and then there was this migration northwest and southeast. Okay, so everything all the way out I-75 going out to Oakland Township, all the way going out Northwestern, everything developed all the way out to Commerce Township and further out all the way to Holly. Now, the jobs are in Detroit. So there's traffic for 2 hours going into the city on the freeway. The roads are all messed up. So people are going to be moving back into the city, and they want to displace the people who protected the city. This is the problem.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's not only those people. I had a conversation. He's a lawyer. We went to high school together, a guy named Mike Timbush. Mike Timbush does a lot of work on the east side, rebuilding the community, rebuilding the spirit of those kids on the east side. He and his buddy Dan Varner, they graduated a year ahead of me. These guys are salt of the earth type of lawyers. Went to University of Michigan together, and they work in conjunction with PAL. But Mike's a white guy, right? So Mike and I were talking, and I was expressing to him exactly what you're talking about. And Mike even had a better point. It's not the white people who live in the suburbs, because in a lot of ways, I look at them as also invested in this area. It's the ones that are coming from Portland. It's the ones that are coming from Texas. They have this mentality that's completely different, because, the closer you have been to Detroit, the more understanding you are of the dynamic. But when you come in from other states and other areas, because there's a great influx of those individuals, I think when you look at the downtown populace, you see so many more people who are from out of state, because if they're going to work for Quicken Loans, or if they're going to work for Little Caesars, or if they're going to work for some of the other big box companies or corporations, they're going to move downtown because they don't have time to figure out where I'm going to buy a house. And a lot of them are 20-somethings executives and haven't started a family. So they don't have to go look in Palmer Woods. They don't have to go look in Royal Oak yet. They can go right downtown. And those are the individuals, you see that mentality that they look at you, me, I'm talking about myself and you, they look at you like the stranger, like you're the foreigner. And in a lot of ways we are, because we don't own there's no African American representation as far as ownership of property in the downtown area, other than there's maybe two, I would want to say.
Well, it's called Gilbertville.
But it's also, there are others, but it's I'll tell you what, it's not an African American friendly environment to the extent of ownership interests. It's a very exclusive club, and you're not invited in.
And I didn't say that in a disparaging way, because he did a lot of good for the city. I'm being factual that a lot of the property downtown is controlled by Quicken Loans and Dan Gilbert and his groups, and all of it to the
and you got to give him credit. he doubled down on Detroit when no one else was. So he's entitled to enrich himself and to benefit of this influx and the change. But what upsets me is they wouldn't allow the mentality of Detroit to be changed until they got rid of sort of African American power.
Right, and that's a problem. Now, we need to do something collectively to help the citizenry of the city of Detroit and to help their children, because it's a very difficult time. There's 9,000 high school dropouts in the city of Detroit. Parents are not motivated to get these 9,000 children back to school. These 9,000 children have a lot of time on their hands. So we have a higher incidence, unfortunately, of crime. We have gun control problems. We have drug problems that wouldn't exist if we could find a way of getting these young individuals rehabilitated, getting them involved in programs. Because believe me, I've talked to the schools about it. The vocational programs, unfortunately, are a failure right now. It's not the school system. It's the lack of participation. So we need to make some changes. What's your spin on that? What do you believe we should be doing as a lawyer to make a difference? Because you're in the courts every day, and who do you see there?
I see those people that you're talking about, because they're the ones who, from a percentage perspective, are going to more likely find themselves within the court system, and I'm talking about the criminal court system, because it's not necessarily a bad thing to be in the civil court system, whether you're being sued or you're suing someone, because, that's where business takes place, and it just comes and finds itself in the courtroom because two people can't get along to the point that each of them have to get lawyers and go to court. But I want to correct a couple of things that you said, not correct, but add to it. You used to talk about the 9,000 kids who are dropouts and the parents can't motivate them, but you look at it. You've got parents who are probably making anywhere from $12 to $15 an hour, maybe 17 if they're lucky. 2 or 3 kids, and there's no other resources out there that are helping them. So it's not that they don't want to. It's they can't figure it out because they're so busy trying to live hand to mouth that it's difficult. It is a difficult set of circumstances. Secondly, as it relates to getting rid of this drug activity that we see happening, because some people say, hey, it's the lack of opportunity that people will find themselves, and that's a true dynamic, but I don't think it's completely true, because even if in times of prosperity, they're going to be drugs, because America is a country that's what people do recreationally. But it's gotten to a point of extremes, and I believe in this city because of the lack of other opportunities. So, as far as what I do as a lawyer, well, we start by doing some of the things that when I first met you, what you're doing. You're talking to people about trying to get their record straight. You're doing this. You're not asking a dime from them. Now, ultimately, some things will come and unfold, and you charge people money to do certain things, but you're entitled to charge for a service. But it doesn't start out like that. That's how I met you. And I do the same thing. I go to different communities. I go to different, where we're at the Considine. Spent half a day or a whole day there showing people how to expunge the records, giving them the packages. That's the start. So we all have we all have to be ingrained in the community, because it has a twofold effect. One, you're giving them some actual knowledge of how to better themselves and how to make themselves more marketable in a competitive work environment. Two, your presence or our presence, and maybe some might say my presence might have more significance because I am African American. But again, you're not too far from me, brother. You know what I'm saying? There's a point in time that my
Let's see.
Yeah, exactly. But if I wanted a business, I'd have to buy it from your father. My father would have to buy it from your father, because a regular white guy wouldn't sell it to him. These communities are intertwining of communities, and that's a longer story that we could talk about. But our presence alone, I understand, has the impact of energizing. The fact that you would come down and I feel bad sometimes when I go to certain communities, certain churches, and certain community centers, and people say, oh, I know you have time out of your day, and thank you for coming down here and seeing us. Almost as if I looked at myself, or at least they do, they look at myself as putting me so far on high that they couldn't even have access to me, and they're so grateful for that. We shouldn't be like that.
No, we're just normal people, just
Right.
like them, and they seem to forget it. But here's a thought that I had, and I want to run this by you. We've got all these neighborhoods where there's just, unfortunately, blighted areas. You go out Gratiot, you go out Michigan Avenue, and you go out Grand River and different parts of Livernois. I see a lot of empty buildings. Don't you think we'd be better off if we got young people and their parents and had some programs that we could develop and some money through the state or through the city or even through the county or even private enterprise to help these individuals start small businesses in the areas? Because if you start small businesses in the area, you start bringing back an interest in the area, and people want to participate.
All right.
For example, I go to a restaurant on Grand River, and it's called River Bistro. It's kind of a neat place. And this gentleman, he's one of the best sous chefs around in the country. And he and his family have taken it upon themselves to start a family restaurant there because they want to see the neighborhood improve.
Right.
But if other people would get involved with their children and participating even at the vocational centers and learning skill sets at the vocational centers, we could have coffee shops. We could have these restaurants. A restaurant isn't the cure for everything. We could have cleaners, candy stores,
we gotta
whatever.
eat.
Yeah, but the point is, we can change the mentality and change the interest to have entrepreneurs in these areas, and this is what's missing. We don't have shoe stores, for example.
Right. So
Yeah.
now, I think I don't think there's a solid mind in the studio or in whoever your viewing audience would disagree with you. But now the hard part is, how do we implement that? Because you look at some of these programs, they're drying up on the funding in so many different ways that, you have to, for one, we need grant writers. We need grant writers who can identify possibilities of funding, because it's going to take money, to get these people, to get the speakers, to come out and, to give, it's almost like a marketing campaign for each individual neighborhood. So how do we implement that is the key, because that is, bar none, the more solid possibility of regenerating what Detroit used to be. Because I remember even when I was a kid, it started ending because I was born after the riots, shortly after the riots. But, my mom, in the neighborhood where I was at, they had a theater, and they had shoe stores. Hamtramck was the downtown for the North End.
I got it.
So, but and I think that if you go to any other big city, they have that. Like you go to Chicago, people don't go downtown every day. People go to their neighborhoods to shop, to buy clothes, to do all those other things. But how do we do it? I just don't know.
Here's my thought. Since we're coming up with an idea that we think is marketable and should work, let's work together and have an opportunity fair. We have expungement fairs all the time. We have job fairs. But let's have a real opportunity fair for small businesses and grant writers where they can get together, where your law firm and my law firm will collaborate and do this, make a difference.
Absolutely. You're a man of ideas. That is, but and you're right. We have to all be in the same room at one point in time to make this work. That's an awesome idea. I will double down on that, because a lot of times people say, a lot of other lawyers, they say, what's Perkins up to now, and all these other things. And people don't realize, and I do talk a lot about capitalization and capitalism and money and things of that nature, because it just makes the world go. But you don't even have you ever noticed in your practice on how you've treated people, you don't even have to have a dollar point in mind. If you're just doing something right, I believe this thing, if you know how to get service, you'll never be hungry. And that's kind of like this concept, what you have. You don't even have to come into it with an idea of making money, but people will make money. Because let me tell you, what I do right now, and maybe there could be some correlation with that, every other month, my firm does what we call a First Friday event. and we meet at different businesses. A lot of times we've been using the Horatio Williams building, Horatio Williams Foundation downtown, which is sort of off of downtown.
Okay, this is the first Friday.
First Friday event. It's a networking event, and it's free. We have free food, free drinks, and the conversation is encouraged. And we have a DJ, and it's a festive environment, and it's an invitation to the community to come together and to see each other. Particularly, it's business people, because I have an email list, and I'm going to include you on it for next. And our next one will be in April, the first Friday in April, and it's and everyone gets an email to come, and it's free. You have to put something you have to put some money where your mouth is, because you have to sort of get people and motivate people to come. And free is a big motivator sometimes for
Well,
people.
free food and drinks bring a lot of people out.
Yeah,
Believe
so-
me.
and-
You're eating on somebody else's dime. You're happy to be there, but that's great. But I'm talking about people who are out there who have ideas, but they're not in a position where they can get the backing of one of
Right.
these incubator groups.
Right.
We should have an entrepreneurship program where they can learn how to start their own businesses, whether it's a tax business. I can't name a particular tax company on the air, but whether it's a tax business or a cleaners or, believe it or not, a shoe repair or a place where you can get your shoes cleaned and polished and repaired, a tie shop. These are silly things, but I watched you tie your bow tie this morning. I was thinking about that. A tie shop. So people want to be able to go out and have fun. One of the most exciting things I do on the weekend is go around to small businesses and see what's available in the small businesses, to see what's there, so I know if I want to get a specialty item, I can find it. I've been going in the Golden Mile area, on Livernois between
Right.
7 and 8 Mile, and there's a
Right.
lot of shops over there.
Absolutely.
And they're
Restaurants.
struggling, but they're making it, but they're struggling, and we need more activity like this so
Right.
people want to participate.
Absolutely.
And I think that'll stimulate minds. We're going to take a break for a minute. We're going to come back and talk about gun control.
Oh yeah.
And we're going to switch gears here because it's really important.
About. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Call 1-800-529-8721. That's 1-800-LAW-USA1. And watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. That's Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law. Saturdays at 10 a.m. here on WHPR Detroit Live.
I had to switch gears with you on this gun issue because I don't know where we're going in this country in the gun issue. As you know, the Second Amendment gives us the right to bear arms.
Yes.
But the issue is, under what circumstances are we entitled to bear arms? And I think we need to really discuss this from a practical and a constitutional point, because there are some countries where you're not allowed to bear arms. For example, in England, ordinary citizens cannot bear arms. In China, ordinary citizens cannot bear arms. But in the United States, we have the freedom to bear arms.
Yeah. And it comes at a great cost. Just statistically, we were talking about this. I mean, we have, is it 11,000 or 13,000 deaths per year by guns? whereas you have a country like China, which is almost 7 or 8 times the size of us, and they have less than 400. So that's a great cost that we experience, and not only do we have, if you think about it, extrapolating those numbers, 13,000, we have the effect of affecting millions of people. And we start to see it now as it proliferates itself into the TV with these incidences of these great tragedies. I mean, these are not just tragedies; these are horrific, cataclysmic. I can't use the adjectives to describe how heart-wrenching some of these moments are. And could gun control have stopped it? But some of the things that they're even asking for, the people who are pushing back when we talk about the NRA, the NRA being a proponent or the moving party to have to secure those people's rights with the Second Amendment, the people who are pushing back from that, background checks, they go, they bog people down in the little details, hopefully never to move the needle to any more form of control of their right to bear arms. And I think they've taken this idea of right to bear arms and they've taken it and exponentialized it.
Should people who are on hallucinogens or opiates have a right to bear arms?
Absolutely not. I think that the law is clear. It's like if you have a CPL, which is a concealed pistol license, if you have more than just alcohol, if you have more than 0.02, it's almost a zero tolerance for the purposes of being able to possess that weapon. You can't have alcohol in your system. So if you can't have alcohol, obviously you shouldn't have opiates, you shouldn't have other hallucinogenics or any mind-controlling drugs in your system.
Well, here I am, I'm involved in an accident, and I'm using this as an example.
Right.
So I go to the doctor, he puts me on Vicodin. It's an opiate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking opiate 4 times a day, and I'm packing. Do I have a right to pack while I'm
I don't
on
think
medicine?
so. I don't think, does the law provide for it? Well, for alcohol it does, but for the opiates it does. There's a gray area there. What testing would be taken to determine that, hey, if you get stopped and you have a CPL and they don't know, if they don't smell narcotics, or if they don't smell like marijuana, they could assess you, and nanograms of marijuana affect your ability to drive. But it's not. It's the only thing, as I recall, is the alcohol component with respect to that.
Good morning.
Well, I have a question.
Go ahead,
I
please.
have a background from 15 years ago where I had a DUI and a domestic violence situation. But that's been cleared up 15 years ago. Why should that prohibit it me from getting a CPL or a right to bear arms?
Well, first of all, domestic violence charges are not expungible.
No, the drunk driving is not expungible. The drunk driving.
Excuse
traffic
me.
is not expungable. You're
Well,
right.
depending, right,
Yeah.
the traffic
The
is
traffic is not
not
expungable.
expungible.
But the domestic could be, and he could have received, and we could use a lot of different examples from his example. So we've got a situation where if none of those were felonies, he should be able to get a license or CPL after, if it's a drunk driving, it would take 3 years, and a domestic violence would take 3 years. But if he got a 7694A, which I know we haven't explained to the audience, where it's dismissed, the domestic's dismissed, then he would only have the drunk driving on his record, and that's a misdemeanor, and the misdemeanor shouldn't prohibit him from having a CPL. But now, if there's a felony in there, and you have more than, you have more than 2 misdemeanors, then you can't expunge the felony, and the felony will prohibit you from getting a CPL. It doesn't necessarily prohibit a person from bearing arms. It's 2 different things that people have to understand. Is that you've got the CPL, which is a concealed pistol license, the ability to walk around with a pistol on your side and conceal it, versus being able to have a weapon in your home. So those are two different things. Now, if you've been convicted of certain felonies, drug felonies, violent felonies like felonious assault, armed robbery, all of those other things, and or any gun offenses like carrying a concealed weapon, which is a 5-year felony. If you've been convicted of any of those felonies are what they're enhanced for the purposes of the law, and therefore you do not have a right to bear arms unless you can expunge them, and you have to meet certain requirements for expunging. And you're the absolute expert in the expungement category. And well, we shouldn't say experts now as lawyers, right? But
No.
but you know expungements because you do those. Like I said, that's how we met. So I don't think he's in a situation that he should be prevented. We'd have to know more about it and talk a little bit further about it. But because he's only described misdemeanor offenses.
Well, I have a problem with people having CPLs anyways. That's just my personal pet
Right,
peeve
right,
about it.
right.
Because I believe that people are not properly trained when they get CPLs.
I also have a problem with police officers only having to be 18 to become police officers and not appreciating the power and ability to carry a weapon, ability to tell people things to do at 18 years old, 19 years old. What do those people know about life? And the training that goes along with it. So as well as you have a problem with CPLs, I do too, because of the lack of the necessity of education behind it and appreciation for how many people have we represented who have been in trouble who've had CPLs but reacted inappropriately because they just didn't have the training.
I don't want to begin to tell you how many people,
Yeah,
firing into a crowd
right.
and killing somebody
Yeah,
and having a CPL. So reckless discharge of a firearm ending up in a second-degree murder charge.
right.
It's just one example. But the point is that there's no real gun control in this country. That's the point I want to make.
No,
We-
and they
we-
don't want it.
We have this Parkland situation, and I was reading in the New York Times this morning about the Parkland situation, is that they had advance warning. But we had advance warning of 911 too,
Yeah.
and nobody does anything. So somebody fell asleep, again, at the switch and didn't do anything. But what's most important is we need to forget about who's not watching, but do something proactive to deal with this. President of the United States is a member of the National Rifle Association.
Okay.
President of the United States comes on the air and says it's not guns that caused the problem at Parkland, it's drugs. So let's assume that he's right, just for the purposes of our conversation. And
Did drugs have anything to do with Parkland, though?
well, I'm just saying, he's saying drugs is the cause of the problem. In Las Vegas, we know that drugs were a big issue when that gentleman was barricaded in the hotel. He was on Vicodin and all kinds of other drugs. But let's get to the sources of the problems. We need to have better legislation that people who are on drugs, who are medicated, should not be possessing weapons.
Right.
And I think that would be something for the legislature to take up. And that would handle both sides of it.
Right.
That would give the rights of the individuals to bear arms and would give individuals who were concerned about other people bearing arms some form of protection.
Right.
But it also carries over to driving and operating vehicles. Should people who were medicated be operating vehicles?
I mean, I agree. And does it become a slippery slope? I don't think so. I think you're right in the sense that, you've got these opiates that are nothing more than over-the-counter heroin. Some of these things, and they're just as addictive. And we've all had clients who have seen better days not having these substances in their life. I think that what happens is what they're doing now is they're just creating shrapnel. They're just creating a big blurb across the screen. When we start talking about gun control, he wants to talk about drugs. It's the chameleon effect of this president that allows him to then get you off topic. Because we started trying to talk about gun control, but then he wants to talk about drugs. Both of these things are at an extreme situation for us in the United States. Not only in the United States, but affecting us right here at home. Fortunately, we haven't had the negative experience of a Parkland, and to that I attribute to this community that, this is and to law enforcement here. It's not to say that these things haven't been captured or caught before the things happen, because there's a lot of things that happen that that we don't know about, and they've stopped. But the drugs problem, and then you could talk about because if we start talking about drugs, then we got to start talking about the pharmaceutical giants that are putting them out here. We're not talking about just street drugs, that people are selling illegally. We're talking about the things that are legal.
And we're talking about the doctors who are writing the prescriptions.
Yep, there it is. The whole industry.
I mean, let's get down and let's get real about it. Who are they writing them? They're writing them to the people who, unfortunately, have been victimized right along.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. And it's, that's one of those things. It's just, where does it stop? And, I don't know. I don't know where it's going to stop. I wish I had the answers, but I know that we have to continue the dialogue. We got to continue talking about it, and we got to continue putting our energies squarely on gun control, squarely on drugs, pharmaceuticals, and also we have to focus in the interplay of how they affect each other. But let's not say Parkland was a situation in which there were, like you said, there were warning signs. People had said something about this kid, and the interactivity or the interconnection between the agencies that should have captured this and just simple people who should have alerted others to it. It failed us at this point. And
Sandy Hook was the same thing. This kid built an arsenal at home.
At home.
And he came out with his arsenal. The point is, if we had a system where we had gun controls, we had a way of tracking possession of guns, and we had a way of ensuring that if people have guns, that they had insurance for their guns. See, that's one of the problems. People aren't required to have insurance when they have a gun, for the gun.
Yeah.
Make it harder to get a gun.
Yeah.
Here's one of my crazy ideas again. Now watch
But here's
out.
the thing: you got an NRA. I think the number is last election was $55 million. Is it? I don't know if it's yearly, but that was a number that was thrown out in 1 year, and I don't know if it was because it was a presidential year or whatever. But this is a major source of investment into this idea of that we're fighting against.
Okay.
So they got their hand in every politician's pocket. That's a tough fight.
We've got a call coming in. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Yeah, when it comes to gun control, here's what I'm seeing a phenomenon, and I think everybody see it. It's this shooting in schools all across the country. No other country is facing that, and I don't hear nobody studying the cause. I'm hearing defense, but I don't hear let's study the cause. Same as like the shooting in the inner city, in every inner city where blacks is a lot of shooting. Why is that? That's a social phenomenon. It's not an individual situation, and I don't hear no one in the black community talking about that either. And what do y'all think about talking about the cause, trying to deal with the cause?
You said the cause?
Yeah, okay, in terms of the cause, it's the accessibility to weapons.
Well, I think that what if I understood what he was saying, he said, what's the cause of the gun violence in the African American and urban communities?
Well, no, he was talking about in the schools. He understood the problems in the street are street problems.
Okay.
But if I understood his question, is what's the cause of all this gun violence in the schools?
Well, I think, like you said, it's accessibility, but it's also it's an American problem. We are a very violent country. This is, if we want to go back historically, we're a country of gangsters. If you think about it, we still owe the crown a couple of dollars. We started this country because we didn't want to pay our taxes. So that kind of mentality, it unfolds itself even in today. And whenever we have wanted something, we've taken it by force. And I don't think that you can separate that kind of mindset from what's happening and why we have some of the certain problems that we have. I know that's a longer, drawn out kind of concept, but you can't escape it. But again, we have, I have to agree with you again. The accessibility of guns to school-age children, because there's so many. If you made it more difficult, then you just wouldn't see the things. But look at what we're fighting against. And I'm not giving up the fight. Don't get me wrong. I'm not giving up the fight. I'm just saying what it is. When you have an NRA and you have all these other NRA-friendly type of organizations with millions, even billions of dollars to fight our groundswell grassroots movement. And it shouldn't be grassroots. It should be mainstream.
Here's my thinking on that. I think we should tax the owners of guns. Because if we tax the owners of guns and we make them have insurance in order to own a gun, they're not going to be as accessible for people because they're going to have to pay money out of their pocket. And every year, just like having car insurance, and every year, just like paying for a new license for your car, you've got to pay a re-up fee or you lose your right to have the gun.
One mistake. The word tax, you got to think about the people that you're talking about. The higher percentage of those people are the people that don't, that word tax, they're saying government's too big and things like that. But what I do like about the concept is insurance.
Registration fee.
No, insurance. Because that's private sector. Because, if you sold the idea of insurance, you can get the private sector insurance companies on board with you, and they've got enough money to match those people and everybody's ideations against taxation and things like that. So, in a way, it's a tax, but it's not. I think it would be a requirement to have insurance on your weapon.
But if you made everybody register every year with their gun,
when your insurance company, because then they because if we do it the way that we're talking about, how we have these federalists and we have other people who feel government's too big, that would only increase the size of government. But if we put in the legislation that you had to have insurance and let the insurance company do it, not that I'm a big, I like the concept of the taxes. I don't mind that, but. What we're fighting here is we have to be very sophisticated in our fight, because they'll bog us down and say, oh, they just want to, these guys, and I'm not ashamed of it, these Democrats, yeah, I'm a Democrat, but, these Democrats just want to increase the size of government again, with this tax. Okay, let's get rid of the tax and let's go to the private sector, and I'll go get Cigna Insurance Company, and I say, Cigna, you underwrite this concept, and you go ahead and you make the money. And then the government will make the money from the taxation that comes from the revenue that's generated from it.
And then that would put a burden on everyone who owned a gun.
Absolutely.
And if they possessed a gun and it wasn't insured, it would be a crime.
That's the first time I've heard about that. I mean, this is an incubator of ideas this morning.
Well, we're supposed to incubate ideas
Yeah.
here. We're supposed to stimulate our audience.
It is.
Because we need change. I mean,
Sorry.
the very idea that the President of the United States suggested arming teachers.
I don't even want to. Are we going to even address that?
I don't want to get into that one because I get in an argument with my math teacher and I call my math teacher a fathead and I get shot in the foot. I ain't going to work.
Right.
Good morning.
Yes, I called back. Your guest was hitting on it right, what I was saying. I was saying the cause, what was the cause in the school shooting? Was the cause in the neighborhoods, in the blacks where they're shooting? We're not dealing with the cause. I think your guest said this is a violent country. The culture is violent. They seen the president talking about nuking another country. and we see him go on trips, and the only thing is working is manufacturing weapons and instigating wars everywhere to keep the economy going, destroying the economy of the atmosphere for profit. If those things are not dealt with, you're not going to deal with no guns. And I agree with the rifle associations that said, the guy said, we should not let the government take our guns, because if we take our guns, they're going to take our rights.
Okay.
And that's what, it ain't about hunting. It's about the government becoming tyrant and protecting 1% against the 90.
Okay,
And
sir.
that's why he said that. So that's what I'm talking about, the cause of both the school and the shooting in the city.
Thank you,
So
sir.
but that's what your guest was talking about it, and I agree with it. The violent culture, the violent society, the history, the violent government today.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, you there?
We're here.
Yeah. I got to take my gun with me out to take the garbage out. I feel like the government should issue guns. I ain't going nowhere without mine. You know, and to tax me again? You know, I'll call the police. Police never show up. So, I don't know.
How do you feel about having...
Barry, I'm usually with you 100%, but I can't afford another gun tax.
Well, how do you feel about having insurance on your gun? I mean, we got to do something.
Well, after I get through paying the rain tax, you know, on the sewage, on the water, and then that ridiculous auto insurance, I can't even afford life insurance.
I agree with you.
know,
We'll get into the auto insurance next week if you want to talk about that. I promise you I will. Okay,
Man,
thanks for
I'm
calling in.
taxed out. I don't have no more money.
Well, we're all tapped out right now, so thanks. Okay, so I understand both sides of this. And for the first person who called back in about the government and the violence, historically, I just want to respond by saying that the city of Detroit and Highland Park and state of Michigan thrived because of the First and Second World War. That built our economy. Now, we don't need any more wars to build our economy. I agree with you. But we do need controls put in place. And to the second person who called in, I understand how you feel about more taxes. And I know how you feel about insurance. But remember that insurance, that's something that's going on here that's a myth and a joke created by the insurance companies because they think just because you live in the city you should pay more for insurance. There are as many reckless drivers in the suburb as there are in the city. So let's get real and equalize what insurance is. And there are a lot of stolen cars out in the suburbs, believe me. So the problems are the same all over the state. It's just a ripoff. We should get after the legislature and we should get after the insurance commissioner on that issue.
It's not as many stolen cars anymore. You can't steal a car unless you're going to tow it away. You know, we owe that credit to the manufacturers. So that's a lie upon lies from the insurance company that's selling us. And I know we're not talking about that this week, but I'm as angry as you are about that.
I'll tell you something great, though, about stealing cars. Last night, I went out to dinner in the city. I left my keys in the car, the door open, had dinner in a restaurant for 3 hours, came outside. My car was there. Thank you, folks in the city of Detroit, for showing respect for other people.
Oh, no. You know, Detroiters, you know, it's a small segment that have allowed people to take an idea about Detroit as being negative. It's just a very small segment because, you know, I'm here. You and I, we could have lived anywhere in the country, but I love Detroit. You know, it's a community that if you go anywhere, it's got this fight to it that it's not you can't manufacture it in Atlanta, L.A. You know, there's a softness with them that you don't get with Detroit. Detroit, we're hard, we're hardcore, and I mean not only Detroiters, but I'm talking about the suburbs too, the people who have been here. So, you know, hey.
Okay, how do people get a hold of you?
Oh, you can call. My office number is 313-964-1702. I'm in the Ford Building downtown on Griswold, 615 Griswold, Suite 400, Detroit, Michigan.
Where do we park downtown if we want to come see you?
Well, there's valet parking in front of my building.
That's what I needed to know, because it's
yeah.
really important,
Oh,
you know?
it is.
I have to walk 6 blocks to go to the courthouse.
Yeah, it's valet parking in front of my building, and between my building and the Penobscot building, there's a parking lot there that if you didn't want to valet your car, so it is parking is at a premium these days.
Not only at a premium, but there's no place to park because of these businesses that
Oh, yeah.
have come in the city. Having said all that, Todd Perkins, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Come back
Thank
again.
you. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next week, and we'll talk about the car insurance issue a little bit. Have a great day.